What is Trump's tariff policy and what would it do to the economy? I've been getting this question a lot in comments, even if the video is about welfare queens, and so I'll try to answer it all here. Let's do this. What is a tariff? A tariff is an import tax. If you would like to sell a good in the United States that was not made here, you have to pay a tax to the federal government in order to do so. That tax can be a percentage or that tax can be kind of a per cap, like a quantity rate. The U.S. abandoned tariffs as both an economic and fiscal revenue raising policy starting in the early 1930s and accelerating after World War II. Right now, the effective tariff rate on about the $3 trillion of goods that are imported to the United States is around 1 to 2%. It's very low. For a lot of goods, it'll be zero. And then for certain specific goods or from specific places, specific goods from specific places, it could be a lot higher. But the effective tariff rate is really low. We have not pursued tariffs as a broad economic policy in about 80 years because there is a lot of evidence and research to show that it is a very bad idea. The only two known consequences of having a tariff is that U.S. consumers will pay higher prices and U.S. producers will be at the risk of retaliation from other countries. So let me explain what that means. One of the biggest misconceptions that people have about tariffs is who pays it. So right now, if you buy a $10 bag of coffee from Mexico, or if you buy a $10 bag of coffee from Target and there's a 20% tariff, Mexico does not pay the tariff. The coffee producer does not pay the tariff. Target pays the tariff. So they sell you a $10 bag of coffee from Mexico, they have to pay $2 to the federal government in order to do so. And in fact, were we to have tariffs on a broad scale in the United States, Target and Walmart would probably have the two largest tariff tax bills because they're two of the largest importers. What Trump has proposed is to raise tariffs from their negligible rates now for most goods to a flat 20% tariff rate for all goods, 60% on certain goods from China, and 100 to 1000% on certain goods from Mexico, depending where he's giving the speech and if he remembers what he says. So I'm just going to talk about a 20% tariff rate. That's what most of the analysis of the damage it'll do has been based on just a flat 20% tariff. So the first thing that a tariff would do is raise prices. You used to buy a $10 bag of coffee from Mexico from Target. Now Target has to pay $2 to sell you that $10 bag of coffee. Congratulations, your coffee now costs $12. That type of cost absorption from tariffs would absolutely fall on U.S. consumers. Goods would get more expensive. A lot of research institutions over the past 2 months have been costing out how much they think households would have to pay in addition each year if a 20% tariff were in effect. And it's somewhere between $2,500 and $4,000 a year for each household. And to give you some perspective, the inflation fight that we've just been to costs about $3,000 per year per household. So we're basically proposing to institute an inflation cost on U.S. households that doesn't come from, a rapid, retreat out of a horrible recession due to a pandemic, but a self-imposed policy. We are going to get you to pay more money. That's the first reason why it's a terrible idea. It just increased the cost. And not for nothing, it's worth mentioning that a lot of the things that we import is food. We don't grow our own coffee. We don't have the climate conditions for it. We don't grow most of our bananas, avocados, various fruits and vegetables. We import a lot of them. So, the biggest one of the parts of your budget that is most at risk for a tariff increasing your price is food. This is why economists are almost universally opposed to it. The second thing that would happen is retaliation. So now we tell France, if you're going to sell cheese or wine or champagne to the US, we're going to put a 20% tax on it. Well, they're probably going to respond in kind, if not worse, and start putting a tax on anything that we sell to France. This is a considerable cost to U.S. producers. So consumers are hit through higher prices. Producers are hit through retaliation. So I find this to be one of the probably lesser known but major lesson of the Smoot-Hawley tariff of the Great Depression. You might have heard it as Hawley-Smoot. Now, in the retelling, it's passed in response to the Great Depression, but in actuality, the Smoot-Hawley tariff was based on a 1928 campaign promise to protect domestic producers, in this case, agricultural producers. over the course of a year and a half of being debated, more and more industries asked for protection from the bill so that by the time Smoot-Hawley passes and is signed into law by Hoover, uh, it is basically a 20% blanket tariff on all goods imported into the United States. And the immediate effect that it had was retaliation against U.S. producers that were currently exported to other countries, and trade across the world dried up, really hurting many manufacturers and producers. Uh, it is remarkable to me that even on the U.S. Senate official history website, the Smoot-Hawley tariff is referred to as one of the most catastrophic acts of Congress ever enacted, because that's how just knowingly bad it is to have a blanket tariff. The U.S. walking away from tariffs was in response to the horrible impacts of Smoot-Hawley on the U.S. economy. When FDR is elected in 32, he starts walking back more of the tariffs that have, Hoover had started walking back as well. And then as we come out of World War II, we accelerate into a free trade economy. So that's why the policy is bad. You have a 20% import tax. That's a tax that's going to be absorbed by U.S. consumers, and it's going to start a fight that is going to be absorbed by U.S. producers. So really, nobody wins. So why propose it? Well, the goal of a tariff, even if you can believe the person proposing it, is to have more protection for domestic industry. We want to bring those jobs back home, so we shouldn't let people import them from other countries. It's a worthy goal that a tariff will not accomplish. It's just a very ineffective policy at accomplishing something like, let's build up domestic industry here, unless it's done in a very strategic, specific way in which you have essentially an all-encompassing industrial policy, of which tariffs or a import ban might be a small part. Right? The idea that you just pass a tariff, tax goods coming into the country at a higher rate, and therefore domestic manufacturing will flourish, it doesn't work like that, because you can't separate out the effect of your manufacturers having access to the US market, and that those manufacturers will grow, but you've already put at risk all the manufacturers that you currently have that are exporting to other countries, and you can't untangle these effects. Right? The US market for domestic goods, the US export market, you can't just say, well, I want some manufacturers to grow here and not be hurt by what the trade war that I'm fighting. You just don't get to have that type of control. So broad tariffs aren't targeted. They have these really bad effects, and then they don't accomplish, manufacturing growth policy. If you would like to grow an industry in the United States and foster an industry's growth, you have to be much more heavy-handed than putting a tax on foreign imported goods. You have to have an industrial strategy behind it. What's kind of amazing to me is that, the Chips and Science Act, it does exactly this. We want to make chips in the United States. Not having access to chips during the pandemic caused a lot of havoc in our economy. It caused a lot of problems in our supply chains. So we're going to grow chips here. So that industrial policy is to have private and public funds leveraged to accelerate investment in chip manufacturing and the education and training of workers in those manufacturing facilities. And at the tail end, kind of the cherry on the top, is the import protection, right? Where the majority of the policy's effects are coming from the spending that the government is putting into building this manufacturing base and this industrial base that we don't currently have. And it's protected while we're building it. But protection isn't going to do that alone, right? We put an import ban on chips in the US, we will not have a chip industry overnight. We invest almost $1 trillion into building a chip industry. Then we put on an import ban. We can grow one here in the US. It's just not enough to say you can't buy this good from abroad. So that is why tariffs are a terrible idea. The whatever small gains you can get from taxing other goods to try and help local producers, they're hurt by retaliation. Your consumers are hurt by prices. All of this was borne out in the 2017 tariffs that Trump has enacted, when he was president. It cost American consumers about $800. It didn't lead to an increase in employment, and there was absolutely retaliation from China for domestic pork producers. It's a textbook reaction, and if it were as easy as all I have to do is have a tariff and manufacturing will flourish in the United States, we wouldn't have abandoned this policy 80 years ago. There's a reason why we don't do it anymore, because it's not good, it's not effective, and it's really, really costly.